So with the longer form nature of TV that we have today, it allows storytellers to set up running gags that don't merely just run for a mere 2 hours, but whole seasons and perhaps the entire length of a multi-season TV show itself. Now these 10 shows, from universally acclaimed dramas to goofy animated comedy series, all offered up deviously sneaky running gags that you almost certainly didn't notice, at least not on your first viewing. So let's take a look at them. As I'm Jules, this is Whatculture.com, and these are 10 long-running TV gags that you've never even noticed. Number 10. CJs Goldfish Bowl contains episode-specific props. The West Wing. The West Wing boasts an especially creative and subtle running gag which endured from its first season through until its 7th and final one. Now you might recall this in one of the show's first episodes, Danny buys CJ a goldfish for her office, but the prop master for the series decided to go one step further by ensuring that new episodes had a thematically appropriate new prop inside the goldfish bowl. For example, a Christmas episode had a Christmas tree in the bowl, a capital punishment episode had a fake dead fish floating in it, and when there were leaks at the White House, there's a plumbing pipe placed in the bowl. There are almost 50 different versions of the gag throughout the West Wing, and yet it is just subtle enough that you couldn't be blamed for missing it. Number 9. Rick never wears a seatbelt. Rick and Morty. Rick and Morty is another show that rewards those who pay close enough attention, though here's a running gag so slight and unassuming that you might have spaced on it entirely, and that is that Rick never wears a seatbelt. Aside from the brief appearances of Detox Rick and Pickle Rick, Rick doesn't wear a seatbelt throughout the show, a nod towards his cavalier attitude towards his own safety, and to be kind, his generally suicidal levels of despondence. Rick's refusal to wear a seatbelt isn't ever directly brought up in the show itself, but it's nevertheless a neat morsel of character shading which confirms the kind of place that he's in. Only in his alternate, healthier states is Rick ever shown wearing a seatbelt. Now that is character development. Number 8. The Reica chair maneuver. Star Trek: The Next Generation. It's entirely possible to have watched all 178 episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation and never noticed the tendency for Reica to sit down on chairs in a rather unusual way, straddling them almost as though he's mounting a horse. In more recent years, the Reica chair maneuver became a bit of a meme as fans started to take notice, and yet, despite how distracting it seems in retrospect, so many millions of fans never once picked up on it themselves. Now there's actually a practical reason for this move though. Will Wheaton confirmed on Reddit that Jonathan Frakes suffered a back injury while moving furniture prior to working on The Next Generation, and so this peculiar means of sitting was actually an attempt to take off some of the strain on his back. Similarly, Reica can often be seen leaning or otherwise bracing himself against objects throughout the series, all of it in an attempt to prevent further aggravation of his real-life existing injury. Despite its basically medical purposes, that hasn't stopped the internet embracing it in recent years as a charmingly odd character trait. Number 7. Reoccurring use of the song Daybreak. Community. Community is unquestionably one of the most meta and self-aware TV shows ever. And though eagle-eyed fans are committed to catching every last split-second gag, there's one hiding in plain sight throughout the series that you may have well missed. This is in large part because it's not something that can be seen, so scouring every inch of a single shot won't actually help you. You see, the instrumental jazz tune Daybreak can be heard on no less than a dozen different Community episodes between seasons 3 and 6, and characters are heard humming it in separate episodes. It also plays on a radio and in an elevator, amongst other situations. According to the creator Dan Harmon, the reason for this is that the production spent so much money securing licensing rights to play the Police's Roxanne in the legendary season 3 episode Remedial Chaos Theory that the season's music budget had mostly been eaten up, and so Daybreak was used to fill the gaps for the season, with Harmon ultimately deciding to run with the ball and turn it into a wider Community gag that you probably had no idea about. Number 6. Tyrion's half-told joke. Game of Thrones. If you're not a hardcore Game of Thrones fan and have only seen each of the episodes once, then you wouldn't have much hope of noticing this sly running gag subtly deployed over the course of 8 seasons. On 3 separate occasions, Tyrion Lannister attempts to tell a joke about bringing a jackass and a honeycomb into a brothel, but each time he's interrupted before he's able to finish it. It first shows up in his trial in season 1's A Golden Crown, and he attempts again to tell the joke in season 6's No One, but is cut short by a ringing bell. While his third and final effort in the series series is in the finale, The Iron Throne, where the scene simply cuts away as he starts to tell the joke. Now, some of Thrones' more obsessive fans did catch wind of this. However, they were infuriated by the lack of closure and attempted to come up with their own answers, while the Huffington Post even asked some comedians to complete the punchline. Again, if you're not a hardcore Thrones fan, this is incredibly easily missed, especially if you've not revisited the series since it ended. Committing to the bit 3 times over an 8-year period, well, that is impressively sneaky. Number 5. The secret McBain movie hidden throughout the show. The Simpsons. The Simpsons is of course jam-packed with running gags both blatant and subtle, from Bart prank-calling Moe's Tavern to the reoccurring crow that always caws distinctively during any establishing shot of Springfield's nuclear power plant. But an altogether more ingenious running joke occurs between the 2nd and 4th seasons, where 5 separate episodes show clips of the fake movie McBain, starring the action hero Rainier Wolfcastle. Viewed across 3 years, the clips seem simple enough. But more recently, as more fans began to binge The Simpsons, they started to realize that these clips all form part of a continuous narrative and are, in effect, a truncated version of the McBain movie. The 4 minutes of footage are effectively a McBain short film, showing McBain's best pal and partner being killed by the corrupt Senator Mendoza, and McBain's blood-soaked quest to avenge his fallen friend. We all remember McBain, but these excerpts are by themselves such typical parodies of corny action movies that most fans didn't even realize that they were connected in a kind of coherent way. Pretty incredible, right? Number 4. Pineapples everywhere. Psych. Hit detective comedy series Psych touted a most bizarre running gag across its 120 episodes, that a pineapple would appear in some form in almost every single episode. Perhaps it might be a whole pineapple, mere slices of one, a pineapple smoothie, a pineapple pizza, or even just images of pineapples somewhere within the frame, but the commitment to the bit is nothing if not admirable. Fans cottoned on enough that a website was made to track the pineapple's location in each episode, all 170 of them, amounting to an average of almost 1.5 per episode. There's never been any official explanation for the gag beyond the showrunners doing it to amuse themselves, and it caught on enough with the hardcore fans that eventually it would have been a crying shame to stop it. Sometimes a running gag is its own weird reward, whether it makes sense or not. Number 3. The gang always reuses the same videotape. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia is basically built on the foundation of in-jokes and running gags. The one of the sneakier one involves the gang always using the same damn grotty VHS tape to record and display their latest audio-visual scheme. The ads for Fight Milk and Kitten Mittens, Dee's Invigoron video, Dennis and Mac's fake terrorist video, and so many more were all shot on the same tape, with each recording over the previous one. Several times throughout the show, when their latest video is playing, we'll see scattered fragments of their previous ones at the beginning and the end of the tape. It's easily missed if you're not paying total attention, but a hilarious ongoing callback if you do. Hopefully they'll never ditch this gag, because the longer it goes on and the further that we as a society stray away from VHS, the funnier it actually becomes. Number 2. Tommy Shelby never eats. Peaky Blinders. Now, Peaky Blinders might not be a show where you'd expect to see anything in the way of a major reoccurring joke, and that's likely why this running gag is rather on the sly side. While recently promoting the show's final season in an interview with the BBC, star Cillian Murphy confessed a gag that's been part of the show since the very beginning, that his character, Tommy Shelby, is never seen eating on screen. Obviously, it's a given that Shelby, being a living human and all that, does eat, but Murphy confirmed that once the production team realized that Tommy hadn't been seen eating in the first 2 seasons, that they opted to keep it going for the remainder. He said, "I remember we had gotten through the first 2 series and then we realized that Tommy had never eaten. We've never seen Tommy eat. Like, he sat down at tables, but he's never consumed a morsel. So we then made it a kind of running gag. So throughout the 36 hours of television, Tommy Shelby never consumes anything, except I think once he consumes a sprig of mint when he's with his son." In its own way, it subtly implies Tommy's obsession with his life's work, something a small quarter of fans picked up on years ago, but which was only recently confirmed as an intentional character flourish by Murphy and the creator of the series. And number 1, foreshadowing Buster losing his hand, Arrested Development. Perhaps the single most memorable moment in Arrested Development happens in the Season 2 episode Out on a Limb, where poor Buster Bluth has his hand bitten off by a loose seal, with the missing limb then being replaced by a hook. Hilariously though, Buster's impending dismemberment was foreshadowed almost an entire year in advance. with a series of gags throughout the latter part of Season 1 and the first half of Season 2. These include a flashback to Michael performing in the play The Trial of Captain Hook, Buster declaring this party is going to be off the hook, a mention of a seal attack on the news, Buster playing a claw game and winning a toy seal, and Buster sitting on a bench which reads, "Arm off." Obviously it says more than that, but the way that he's sitting obscures the rest of the text. Now these are just a few examples, but of course nobody read into these gags on an initial viewing because nobody knew the fate awaiting Buster. Even on repeat watches, most of these sight gags and one-liners come so thick and fast that you might well miss them, and that makes them utterly brilliant.